Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, the channel for film reviews, discussions, and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner, joined with my co-host George Aldridge, and welcome to another episode of Film Club. On this week's show, we'll be bringing you a double review, schedules being what they are. We unfortunately couldn't get a Film Club review out last week, so today we're making up for it. We'll be reviewing both 2011's sci-fi comedy Attack the Block and 2012's dark comedy Seven Psychopaths. How Film Club works is, at the end of our main show, we take it in turns each week, choosing a film that vaguely ties in with whatever we reviewed at the time of our main show. We're reviewing Attack the Block first, so backtracking to last week was our main show, was our discussion on Force Friday, and George, it was your pick, so give us a few reasons, or the one reason why you picked Attack the Block.
Well, the main reason was that obviously John Boyega's the main guy in Attack the Block. It was his breakthrough film, and now he's in Star Wars. Probably that's got a lot to do with it. But it was just interesting to kind of, that journey to The Force Awakens, they sort of merchandise. This is kind of the backlog of the films to The Force Awakens.
Yeah, definitely, and obviously he's been cast as the lead character in Star Wars now, and really he's probably done a few other projects as well, little side projects, but this is sort of the main film of note and worth that he's done. So I was going into this mostly interested to see his performance, to be honest, so that I've seen that, and now when I do come to see Force Awakens in December, I can see like, wow, this John Boyega's really got talent and he can really change his persona in films. But besides that, I remember seeing the trailer for this a while back in the cinemas. It was I think it was a lottery funded film, wasn't it? A really low budget British movie. But honestly, like the kind of subject matter that was in it, I'm not a big fan of these sort of to me, this film reminded me a lot like Kidulthood, Adulthood. I think there was a film called 4321 which had the same casting as that sort of council estate Londoner, sort of like gang culture type movies I've never really been massively into. But this one had what those other films don't. It had that edge of being a sci-fi comedy. It looked kind of humorous with the aliens, and then this ragtag team of teenagers have got to sort of band together and get rid of the aliens, kill them, and stop the invasion from happening. So I thought the concept was interesting, but I was worried about the actual film itself and more like the characters and stuff. I think this was my first time seeing the film, by the way. But I think you've seen it before, haven't you? So what were your thoughts, if you can remember, going in to see the film when you saw it for the first time?
The first time I saw it was one of them where I didn't see it at secondary school because it came out, I think I was year sort of 10ish, and it was quite hyped up, but then like the cinema wasn't really showing it. I think that was a case for a lot of cinemas in England actually, whereas marketed loads, but it was hardly any performances, which is a bit odd because it's kind of turned into a bit of a cult film. But I think I saw it when it came out on Blu-ray, and then I quite liked it because obviously they're kind of saying Joe Cornish, he's kind of a part of Edgar Wright's crew, and you can see some sort of similarities in the film, but it was all the hype leading off that, and obviously they had Nick Frost there for all the marketing because really there was no one else to sort of show for it and help do it. And so I remember seeing it, and I enjoyed it then, and obviously the big thing after that, only a year after I see it, sorry, it wouldn't have been a year or two after, obviously they announced the Star Wars cast, and I was there like, hey, it's that kid from Attack the Block, and I was there like, that's kind of really cool because not a lot of people have seen it, and it's not interesting to kind of notice him from something else.
Yeah, and as I said, like I was kind of the same. Like I wanted to see John Boyega, in something before I see Star Wars, and I'm just checking the budget now. It was done on an 8mm budget, only made 5.8 back though. I actually thought this actually grossed more than its budget, but clearly it didn't. But I think that I don't want to say it's got a cult following, but I think it's one of those movies like I was speaking to someone today and I mentioned that I'd saw this movie for the review, and they was like, Attack the Block, which one's that? And then I sort of like broke down the plot a bit, and then they instantly remembered what it was and they remembered seeing it. The plot, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a very basic plot. It focuses on a bunch of teenagers. They're a street gang in London, and then all of a sudden aliens attack, and it's literally them banding together to try and kill the aliens and get out safe. And that's the plot. It's a really, really simple premise. It's quite an effective premise, I think, but if we're going to sort of get into our thoughts now and our take on it, I actually didn't really care for this movie, to be honest. And I think what it was down to is that, number one, it just wasn't my style of comedy, and two, I really kind of hated every single character in this movie. It does some creative things which we'll get onto later with like the aliens and stuff, and actually quite really enjoyed the look of the aliens. It's a look I don't think we've seen before in sci-fi or with aliens. But what I said before, like it's this kind of kidulthood street talk, like blood, blat, blat, all that. I can't get behind it at all, and so because of that, I just didn't connect with any of the characters.
See, it's different for me because I've seen Kidulthood and Adulthood and all them, and to me this was so refreshing because this is clearly a whole piss take of it. I mean, I know
Mm,
they're trying to take it seriously on screen, but there is no way that Joe Cornish is right in this film, and he's trying to take himself seriously as a director, unlike Noel Clarke, who's been doing the other films. So I kind of saw it as this joke from the beginning. I think that's why I liked it, and
mm.
also I think because it's more of an age thing. I know we actually have a massive age gap between us, but the fact I was at school when I saw it,
Yeah.
and obviously now you've just seen it for the first time, it's almost like an 8 year age gap if you compare the first time you see it, I'm guessing. And
Yeah.
it's just one of them where it's kind of like I think I saw it at the right time, the right place because at school everyone was sort of loving it. Like they told me want to go home, go play FIFA. That's like was hilarious back then for all of us because that's the sort of stuff we do. We'd go home after school, we'd play FIFA for a few hours, and it was kind of to me everyone kind of joking around, taking the piss, and when the aliens come,
Mm,
it's almost like not hysterical, but when he's there like allow it and all that, like that literally started off the word allow. I'd never heard it before this film. I don't know if it was big in London at the time, obviously, with the Brap, all that sort of stuff was, but this film literally broke out allow it to everyone I know, and that's
mm,
kind of not like terminology mainly, but you know if you'll sometimes say allow it now, like more than I would obviously today, but it was one of them where I think it's almost a coming of age film. That's the way I saw it. Because the one thing I want to say of John Boyega, he's great in it. And the thing of me, obviously, I first see him in this. I think he's kind of a gangster in real life, and then you kind of read that although he's from Peckham, you know, he's a good guy. His dad's like a pastor or something like that, so he's nothing like his on-screen character. Obviously, I shouldn't really think he
mm.
is, but it's just one of them because he's a Londoner. You'd think this is him, and it's just. I think the funniest thing the whole film to me was when he said he's 15 because he's so clearly
Oh
not.
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just crying.
Yeah, and I think some of the funniest bits in the film were those like references to stuff like FIFA, like you were talking about. There's a whole bunch of them scattered throughout the movie, but I'm trying to think of one now. I should have probably made notes on it, but there were some references to like whether it was films or games or sort of like pop culture stuff like that, and those were probably the lines that I enjoyed the most. And you're talking about John Boyega's character of Moses. Probably him and Jodie Whittaker, who plays Samantha, who's the girl they try and they attempt to mug at the start before the aliens land. Those two characters definitely go throughout the most changes throughout the film. I think. Obviously, as I said, like Moses starts off, he's in a gang, he's got a knife, he's about to mug Jodie Whittaker, and then by the end of the movie, he's apprehended by the police, he's loaded into the police van, and then everyone's chanting his name. It's almost like, obviously, with his namesake Moses, it's almost like a religious moment, like going back to like the Bible or like the story of Moses stuff. Like the whole crowd's chanting his name, and then she, by the looks of it, drops the charges, and it doesn't show you him getting away with it, but you pretty much assume that that's how the film would turn out afterwards. Like the police would let him go. She covers for him and says like he's just a neighbour, he had nothing to do with the mugging, and so she accepts him as a friend, and then he's sort of claimed as a hero among the neighbourhood. And I thought that was quite a cool character arc for him. But as I said, like I don't know. I think it's just because it's not my style of comedy, and I think you said earlier, didn't you, that Joe Cornish, the one who wrote it and directed it, he has some ties with Edgar Wright, and I do think there are some of those Edgar Wright types of comedy moments in it, even down to the fact that like Nick Frost is in this movie as well, which was a massive surprise to me because I did not know he was in this film, and his character's pretty funny. Um, but it definitely does have that element of an Edgar Wright film. But I think that, say, if Edgar Wright had have directed this film, I think that the comedy would have been a little more tighter, the characters would have been a bit more likable, and instead of John Boyega, we would have probably have had like Simon Pegg or something.
Yeah, it would have been. It's quite hard to see how different it'd be, but it would be radically different. I mean, the thing with Joe Cornish is that I think I chatted to one of my lecturers about this. He was kind of saying you've got this guy, and okay, he's from London, but he's from Westminster. He's
Yeah.
not from a council estate. You've got a guy that's had, he's apparently his family's loaded. He's been at good uni, stuff like that, and he's there trying to, almost have the perspective of the lower class without trying to sound nasty, but that's essentially what Moses is in it. So
Mm.
it's quite hard to take it seriously. That's why I think it's a joke. If this was actually him being serious, then it's completely wrong. But I think it worked for me. But going back to Moses, I think he's obviously he's the main guy, but I think the whole film you start off hating him, especially when he mugs the woman, I've forgotten her name.
Samantha.
That's the one. And after he mugs Samantha, you kind of like, oh okay, and then he persists with it, and then gradually you're still not liking him. There's bits and pieces, but towards the end, I think you kind of turned on him, and at that moment, it's when he kind of reveals that he lives with his uncle, and his uncle's clearly a waste man or something like that, and he's got like bed sheets that are like Spider Man. It's things like that. So
Mm.
it nicely tees off for him, and I think John Berger said on Twitter loads of times. People always tweet him about Attack the Block still, and he was kind of like joking around with Star Wars. Says I'm nothing like Moses in Star Wars. Don't get me wrong. The one thing I do want to say is that whenever he got the samurai sword out, I was literally there thinking like, if someone's going to edit this and put a lightsaber in, aren't they?
Oh yeah, totally. And like with the supporting characters as well, I guess we can go over really briefly. I've sort of mentioned Jodie Whittaker as Samantha. She was quite a likable character from the off. I mean, she's the victim at the start, and so you sort of instantly sympathise with her there. But then her growth throughout the film, she almost takes command quite a lot in the movie. She organises them. She's the one who has to kind of knock their heads together and sort of make them sensible and take on the alien force at the end. And then really the other supporting characters of worth are probably Nick Frost's character, but other than that, like all the other like teenagers in the gang and stuff, they all kind of merge together for me. I don't know if you picked up any on any of them specifically, but to me it was more or less Samantha, John Boyega, and then like occasional appearances of Nick Frost.
Um, I want to talk about there's some hipster in it which I hated, the stoner guy,
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, I
and
remember, yeah,
he was just doing my head in, and it was quite frustrating listening to him because you just know that's a posh boy trying to play
yeah,
it like a bad man, and it's one of them. But with the gang, I like that they're quite different, although they're almost the same. Um, the one thing I will say, without getting into the individuals, I love the fact they killed two of them, in the sense
yeah,
that this is an alien invasion. You'd almost expect it to be like not Shaun of the Dead, because Shaun of the Dead it kind of they kill off one or two, but none of the main three. But you don't watch this film thinking that any of them will die until they actually do, and
mm,
it's kind of that twist where okay, there is something serious going on here. And then again, you can just tie it to Joe Cornish. I mean, look at Shaun of the Dead. I've said that before. They're not afraid to kill people, and you get that vibe off the whole film. But I thought Nick Frost was hilarious. He's only in it for 2 or 3 scenes, but when he's kind of in it, it's how he's kind of walking around with his like mopey long hair as well. It's quite funny.
yeah, and killing some of the cast off, it definitely ups the stakes, and they do die in quite brutal ways. Actually, the one that's coming to mind is the smoke filled corridor, and they know there's an alien in there, but they can't see it, and then he gets like his throat ripped out or something by one. You see it like all happen. It's like really gory and stuff. Really good use of practical effects as well, which I always harp on, and it was really good to see in this film. And then I guess that leads us on to the aliens themselves. All done with practical. I think the only times that they're CGI'd is like the faraway shot where you see like a whole army of them climbing up the building, and that's completely fair enough. The first time we see one of the aliens, though, it's I'm trying to remember now. I don't know if it was a baby one, but it was like a smaller one, wasn't it? It didn't have any hair on, and it was like this little puppet thing, and people
Oh
were
yeah.
thinking it was a dog and stuff like that, and that looked really cool. That looked like a genuine, like real life alien. But then the main threat throughout the film are these. They're like the only animal I can describe them as are like gorillas. Really, they're sort of like hairy beasts, and they've got bright neon fangs, and I think their blood as well is neon, isn't it? Which like when you go to like these raves or stuff at clubs, like the whole neon paint that's through around, so you get a lot of shots like that in it. But I just thought it was. It's not a great design for an alien, but what I commend them mostly about it is it's not because it's a design you don't expect. It's quite original in that sense. Like I don't remember seeing a film with aliens in that looked in any way like this. Like you usually get the big oval heads, the long necks, the long arms for alien invasions and stuff like that. But you never see sort of beasts on all fours chasing people through the streets like this. So I've got to give them credit for that, and the fact that I'd love to see the behind the scenes with this as well, to see like all the guys in the suits and everything like that, because I do think a lot of work went into the costumes, and they're not the most sort of scary looking monsters I've ever seen in an Alien thing, but I think that kind of works for it because it's not inherently a sci-fi film, is it? It's still a sci-fi comedy. So in that respect, I think it's a success with the aliens in it.
Yeah, the way I've always seen it was that, this is a very, very small budget and how they're going to have, these aliens. And I think it works. The fact that they're almost black, as black as the output would allow it to on the screen. And
Mm.
then you've kind of got the teeth, which I found are actually animatronic, which is pretty cool. They had guys in suits doing it and animate them afterwards. And then I think the only almost CGI was probably just the black fur coming out and the teeth, which was quite cool because they haven't got the budget to have some interesting beasts, and obviously you can't really use the puppet they use, which worked in it as the sort of woman thing.
Mm.
Um, but if you're gonna get killed, you can't have something that obvious and like not scary, but you needed a threat. And I think by seeing nothing about the aliens, it helped because you kind of wonder what it's like in that. And then when the teeth showed, it just looked awesome as well.
I do question how, though, like the kind of aliens that they are can man spacecrafts like they can, because I do think you see some shots of UFOs, don't you? If I remember rightly, or do they come down just in asteroids?
I think it was almost like Transformers, where an asteroid just hit the Earth and then they came
Yeah.
out. But yeah, it would
Uh,
have been quite bizarre because they can't really see either.
yeah, that's true. But I guess like before we round out our review on Attack the Block, we can just go through our favourite scene or favourite scenes. Um, as I say, I really didn't care for this movie, to be honest. But if I had to pick a favourite scene, I think you mentioned it earlier. It's where John Boyega's got the samurai sword, and it's all in slow motion. And it's towards the end of the film. It's when he gets cornered in the building. He's like running from room to room, and he's got the rocket that he needs to blow them up with. And it's like this whole like just series like sequence where he's running through the different rooms and in the apartment, and they're all chasing him, they're all cornered him, and then he lets off the rocket and it blows up, and then he flies out the window. That was probably my favourite scene in the film. I thought that was done quite well and quite stylistic as well.
It was a good one. I think with mine, it's kind of hard to pick one because I've got two or three I like, but I don't love. And I
Mm.
think the standout is not the mugging at the start, but literally just his terminology and just how they build up to allow it being like the funniest thing.
Mm.
But if not, I've got to go with the two kids when the armed police come. They just hide in the bin, and it's like you best believe, fam, and it's all his attempted London slang, and it was just funny.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of brings us on to overall opinions now. I'll go first. I I didn't care for this movie, to be honest, but I know that I knew going in, to be honest, that I wasn't going to come out absolutely singing this film's praises. It's just purely down to it's not my kind of film. It's not my style of comedy. Um, would I recommend seeing it? If you don't like films like Kidulthood and stuff like this, and actually I should bring up as well, when I saw the trailer for Kingsman, I was really, really worried it was going to turn out to be a film like this or like Kidulthood or something like that. But whereas Kingsman took the character and sent him on a journey where it changed him and it sort of got out of that kind of environment, I think I enjoyed Kingsman a lot more. Um, I don't know with this, as I say, it's just not my style. It's not my kind of movie, and I think that's ultimately why I didn't ultimately care for it. Would I recommend seeing it? If you've got nothing else to watch and you've never seen it before and you're curious to see it, I'd definitely check it out because you might be surprised by it. I do think that the aliens are quite original, and you do get a few good shots in there with the aliens and the action scenes in it. If anything, check it out if you're curious to see John Boyega in something before you see Force Awakens, because that's one of the reasons I wanted to watch it, and I don't regret seeing this because now I can go into Force Awakens and see just what a range that guy's got and like his career and where it's going to go from here. And I think this is a good starting point to for a film to watch for that.
Definitely, I think with me on this one, it's one of them where if you're gonna really research episode 7 like mentally, then this is kind of on that comprehensive list. Um, and it's just one of them. I think don't watch if you're American, you won't understand half of it.
Oh yeah.
Um, if you're sick and tired of kidulthood, adulthood, watch this. It's kind of just this really light relief. And it's just if you want to watch something new and different, give it a go. But it's just up to you whether you like it because it's very divisive. I think you either like it or you dislike it. There's no middle ground.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's basically our review on Attack the Block. Now we're going to get into our review for Seven Psychopaths. This was my choice following our main show, which was on Legend. And the reason I picked Seven Psychopaths basically the link I was going off was the guy who did the music, which is Carter Burwell. Um, I checked the guy's work out and I saw that he did this film, and this was a film that I've seen a lot of people talk about. I've always seen the name crop up here and there, and I heard it was really good as well. I don't think the budget was that massive on it. No, I'm just checking here. It was done on a 13.5 mil budget, made 32.6 back, which is pretty good going. But yeah, this was again like Attack the Block. It was one that I wanted to see out of curiosity because I'd purely seen so many people just like talking about it or the name cropping up here and there. So Seven Psychopaths. It came out in 2012. It's a dark comedy, like crime film, I guess. It's directed by Martin McDonagh. He directed In Bruges before this. I think you've seen that, haven't you? Because
Yeah.
you've talked about that before. This was the first film I've seen of this guy's work, but instantly when I saw this, I I just fell in love with the style of it. I'm trying to think. It very much seemed like a combination to me of like a Tarantino or a Matthew Vaughn. It had that sort of really hyper violence to it, but it also was done in a tongue-in-cheek way and sort of cartoony. But it also had moments of humanity to it as well, which I really, really enjoyed.
See, with this, I saw this just after it came out on DVD and stuff. Missed it at the cinemas. I was looking forward to it. I loved In Bruges. I was waiting for this, and I like Sam Rockwell. And then it was quite bizarre. Like when I first saw it, I didn't know then, but the way I kind of see it now is this not Wes Anderson, but it's got this really like unique feel. And I don't really like Wes Anderson, but I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed In Bruges, and it was I understand the Tarantino comparison. That's the way I'm looking at it more now. But this film is kind of what the press pretend Wes Anderson is, and
Yeah.
he's not on this level, and this was just so brilliant in itself. I mean, we'll go into it now, but I just thought it was phenomenal, and it was such a nice surprise as well.
Yeah, and what I liked about it as well, it's really self-referential. I'm going to take a guess at your favourite scene when we get to that later on, but there's like a whole scene which breaks down sort of like all the tropes and like action, as I said, like stereotypes in films, and there are a lot of lines like that throughout the film. And I'd seen the cast before. I knew that Christopher Walken was in it. Christopher Walken's the man. It's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to seeing Jungle Book next year. I think the guy's awesome. But like, I didn't know that Woody Harrelson was in it. Again, he's brilliant in everything he's in. Absolutely love him in Zombieland. Um, and Sam Rockwell's great as well. Like, the whole cast is brilliant in this film, and even some of the side characters. Like you'll see actors cropping up that you've seen in things before, and then you sort of pick them out. Like go, oh, that's the guy from that film or whatever like that. But I knew nothing on the plot. That's one thing I didn't know. So I watched this last night. This was a blind watch for me. I just turned the film on, didn't read anything about the plot, and just went straight into it. So this is going to be filled with spoilers. So if you haven't seen Seven Psychopaths and you want to see it, turn the review off now because we are going to be spoiling this quite a bit. But the plot itself is that Colin Farrell plays a struggling screenwriter who's working on a project called Seven Psychopaths, and so he gets sort of like caught up in the crime underworld with Sam Rockwell, who makes a living from stealing dogs and then returning them to the owner for the rewards, and then Christopher Walken's also with Sam Rockwell. And the plot's basically just Woody Harrelson's this absolute psychopath who's trying to get his dog back that Sam Rockwell's stolen, and Colin Farrell just gets caught up in the whole shenanigans. And it was a really quirky plot. I really enjoyed it. And then we won't break down the film piece by piece, but just from the opening scene where you've got the sort of guys standing on the pier, and they're having this, and this is where I bring up the Tarantino sort of um, like comparison, because like the dialogue was so on point with like a Tarantino movie, how they're having the banter back and forth, and then out of nowhere, like an assassin just walks behind them, shoots them both dead. Who's one of the psychopaths who throws the Jack of Diamonds cards, and then the title comes up, and instantly I thought, okay, I love this film. I love where it's going. I love the style of it, and you get like the captions coming up on screen, like Psychopath number one, everything like that. I just thought it was a great opener, and then from there, the whole film's exactly like that, and it just doesn't stop until it hits the credits.
Yeah, and I think with this film, that opening scene, it kind of takes you. You know what you're gonna get. You know, not almost the sit-up, but you didn't really expect them to like have that kind of death. So you're there like concentrating throughout the whole film, not concentrating like Inception was, but you're almost there wondering, hoping, you're trying to work out what's going to happen next. It's quite frantic because there's so much going on, and although you can strip it to a basic plot, it blows up in itself, and that there's so many little threads. And the one thing I want to say is that this ties up the film completely, and it works perfectly. I mean, we'll go into characters soonish, but I thought with this, Actually, I can't really say about spoilers. I'll let you carry on.
No, I thought we were spoiling to be
Oh no, no, I
honest.
meant
But so if
spoilers,
you,
but it's more about Sam Rockwell.
oh, is it? Oh, okay. Well, what I liked as well is if I'm thinking of some of my favourite scenes from this movie, most of them, to be honest, come from like the side characters. There's a character in it played by oh, let me just check his name really quickly. Tom Waits, and he has like this whole backstory for his character and this history he had with this woman, and they became serial killers essentially, but they're killing other serial killers, and it's like this whole flashback that goes on for about 5 minutes or something. It's really fascinating to watch, and I think what they do with the characters, they really flesh out their backstories, and even fictional characters. Like as part of Colin Farrell's project, he comes up with this Vietnamese guy, and you get a flashback at the start. It's when the idea hasn't been crafted, but then throughout the film, Christopher Walken towards the end on a tape recorder has his own idea for what the backstory is for this particular psychopath, and that's a great scene in itself. It's like filmed beautifully as well. It's done in a really over stylized way, and I can't say enough positive things about this film, to be honest. I think this film came right the hell out of nowhere. Like, I don't know what other films it was up against, but as I say, it was a small budget, but for the cast they got, and the writing is so clever and on point, and the violence is really extreme in this film. Like, you know, you're going to get into that with a film called Seven Psychopaths, but like, if you are going into it wondering, like, this has to be an 18 surely, like with a certificate in it, but this does get really violent. But although some of the scenes of violence are quite shocking, it's still done, as I said, in that very over stylized, cartoony way, and it backs it up with like a absolutely on point script, and it's hilarious to watch as well. Like, there's a scene, I'm going to spoil one here, with Sam Rockwell where he's talking to Woody Harrelson's girlfriend, and then he gets a call on the phone that Christopher Walken's wife's been murdered, so he just hangs up the phone and just shoots her in the stomach and walks off. And like, he has no remorse or anything like that. And then throughout the film, he becomes one of the psychopaths himself. I'm gonna let you talk here because I'm rambling. I'm sort of all over the place with this one, but yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna kind of go into the character thing first because I think
Yeah,
each
yeah.
point kind of comes off the main of the characters, and you kind of start with Colin Farrell, who is Martin, who is obviously making the script, and it's kind of he's just this boring bloke placed in the middle, is frustrated of his life, and his best mate Billy, which is Sam Rockwell, is he's trying to really urge him on, and then with Colin Farrell, he kind of does that kind of Colin Farrell role where he's just awkwardly involved with everything, and when he needs to go over the top in anger or something, he does it just like every other film he's done. So it
Mm,
plays really well, and I think coming off the back of In Bruges, because he's the main character in that as well, he really this and In Bruges are probably the best films I've ever seen him in because they're just so perfectly suited to him. Because whenever you see him, he's either really miserable or just more miserable. He's very similar,
mm.
but this I think it worked off him. He's funny and he's quite likable in it. I mean, there are times which you go like, oh God's sake, Sam Rockwell's like trying to like get him up, trying to help him do stuff, but Colin Farrell just kind of hums along, but it just perfectly works for him. And then I think when the whole plot expands and when it kind of finishes, we'll go into the dog because later on because that's literally almost a character itself too.
Oh yeah, totally.
And it's almost Colin Farrell's caught up in the wrong stuff. But if you go into Sam Rockwell, who to me steals it, it's out of him and Christopher Walken. But Sam Rockwell
Yeah,
is
yeah.
unbelievable, and it's this revelation that he's the psychopath, and you don't really know, you can't really see it coming because he's kind of this like useless dopey mate of his. And then when it kind of realised it, I was like, oh shit. And you just think, and then as the film progresses, he's getting madder and madder, and he has this incredible monologue towards the end where he pictures the final fight, and then as he's sort of monologuing, they actually cut, and they've actually filmed this over the top, ridiculous final fight, everything laid out with the Vietnamese priest and all of that, and
Mm.
he's just brilliant, and it all comes off him stealing the dog from Woody Harrelson. But I think Sam Rockwell, what I was going to say earlier was that he is to me like everyone talks about Deadpool, but to me, Sam Rockwell's the guy that should have always been Deadpool because,
That's a great shout.
especially in this film, he pulls off that smug attitude like no one else. Ryan Reynolds is just Ryan Reynolds, whereas Sam Rockwell he can kind of go into being different people, but he's the guy that should have been Deadpool. I've always said this, and he's just great in this. I love him. I mean, you can watch him in almost anything, even Charlie's Angels. He's got this presence to everything he does, and this is arguably his best role.
See, I never thought of that, but now you say that, that's an absolutely great shout. I could totally see him as Deadpool, and you're right. Like there'll be moments where characters are talking, and he'll just sort of interrupt with like a snappy one-liner or something self-referential, and he is hilarious in this movie. And to be honest, he sort of gets funnier as the film goes on, and it becomes more and more psychotic to the part where you'll probably get into this later, but like with the standoff at the end where he's holding the dog up with the flare gun. But just going back to Colin Farrell quickly, when I saw that he was in this movie with Colin Farrell, I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff really, but as you said, like he's usually sort of really like down, like he doesn't want to be there, he looks miserable, or he is incredibly sort of over the top, animated, overacting. Like if you've seen Daredevil, for example, where he plays Bullseye, in that he is very much just chewing the scenery. He just doesn't care. He's just over the top. And when I knew that this was a comedy, I thought, oh great, he's going to be just over the top. He's going to be trying to steal the limelight from everyone. He's going to be really irritating, but he really isn't. His characters, if I'm going to compare him to any kind of character, he's almost like sort of like Bilbo Baggins, like in Battle of the Five Armies. He's very much an observer. He's the audience member's proxy, and he's just caught up in all these weird situations, and he's sort of like just looking around like what the hell is going on, and that's pretty much like the audiences as well. And I really like those kind of characters, and I think he plays it totally well. And as you said, Sam Rockwell is awesome. I've seen him in a few things. He's always a show stealer. Probably the biggest film I've seen him in is Green Mile, in that where he plays a proper serious psychopath in that, who is terrifying, but he also has funny elements to him. Um, and then I hated this movie, but in Iron Man 2, for example, I thought that Sam Rockwell was the strongest thing in that movie. I think a lot of people did,
Yeah.
although the film wasn't great. And you're right, he is a show stealer, and it's, as you say, it's definitely a toss up between Sam Rockwell and Christopher Walken in this. I've always liked Christopher Walken and stuff. One of my favourite films with Walken in is probably Mouse Hunt, the comedy from the 90s. He plays an exterminator in that. He has a very Everyone knows how Christopher Walken speaks. Everyone's got a Christopher Walken impression. He has a very unique way of talking. Um, and it's great to see him in movies. Like he doesn't do all that much now, unfortunately, but this is probably one of the best things I've seen him. And he's got a very sort of quirky, dry sense of humour that a lot of people probably wouldn't get. But I love his character in this, and he does get a very tragic backstory in it as well. And we've got to bring up Woody Harrelson too. I mean, the guy's awesome. He's just recently been cast as the villain for in War of the Planet of the Apes as well. So it'll be interesting to see him play. I'm guessing that's going to be a straight role because it'll be pretty unlike that movie if it goes all out comedy. But I think we've seen him do serious stuff before. I want to say he was in No Country for Old Men.
I think he was. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, for example, I've seen him in that, and that was a serious role in that. And then he does comedy roles like Zombieland, which is probably one of my favourite comedy characters I've seen in anything. And he's brilliant in this. He's a psychopath, but so he'll just like shoot people just randomly in cold blood, and he is quite scary in that regard. But he's just so much fun up until the end when there's like a sort of Mexican standoff between Sam Rockwell, one of Harrison's guys, and Harrison himself, and they've all got guns trained on each other. And Sam Rockwell's holding up the Shih Tzu dog with a flare gun pointed to it, and Woody Harrelson's just like breaking down, trying not to cry. And it's the bit where Sam Rockwell sort of just goes insane and calls Harrison and says like, "We're in the middle of the desert. Come to us. Don't bring any guns." And he shows up, and Rockwell just instantly shoots Harrelson because you would expect that he would have bought a gun, and they sort of pat him down, search him, and he's like, "I didn't bring any guns because you told me not to." And I like right there, it's moments like that in the writing that sort of break down all the usual conventions of action movies and thrillers and everything like that. And it was just fantastic. And it's the writing's great, but it's just elevated with the performances and the characters themselves because they are so much fun.
Yeah, and I mean, going into Woody Harrelson, in Zombieland he steals it, and in this he's just brilliant. I mean, he can play good guys. You've seen the Hunger Games, but this he was almost born for these type of roles where he's just out there, and it's when he's on his knees and the dog won't come back to him, and that's just like his life gone in front of him. And I think the best about the whole thing is the fact that he is this proper hardcore gangster, and they've stolen his Shih Tzu, and it's literally the whole thing. It's you've stolen my Shih Tzu. I'm gonna come find you. And that's how everything happens. It's how you meet Christopher Walken. I mean, talking about Christopher Walken, one of the twists is to find out that he is the guy from the backstory, which Sam Rockwell knew and tells Colin Farrell. So I'm calling them by their real names because it's so hard to not call
It's
them by.
easier, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just Christopher Walken. You've got the sort of subplot of him and his wife, and then obviously Woody Harrelson kills her, and it's the tragic backstory which you said earlier. It's when you start finding out more about him. He reveals the balaclava for his almost slit throat. But I think the cast as a whole is one of the strongest casts you'll ever see in a film. Not a film like this, but for what it is, you can't pick four better people to have done what they did. I mean, if you're looking at it, Mickey Rourke was originally cast as Woody Harrelson. I could not have ever imagined that working, especially with the way the script is, the way the film is. Woody Harrelson's far better suited to it, and it's just this brilliant ensemble where each one works on their own, and even the dog.
Oh yeah, and you know what they say. What is it like? A filmmaking rule: never work with children or animals. But the animal is great in this one, and they've got it trained well. I love the bit at the end where and this is massive, massive spoiler. So if you have stuck with us this far, turn off now. The bit where Sam Rockwell gets shot in the head at the end, and he like reaches his hand out and he tells the dog to like paw his hand, and the dog does it, and as you said, like Woody Harrelson's just staring there, just crying, like as you said, like his life's over. But I noticed something as well, just checking here, the production companies. We have got sort of an unintentional link between the two movies we reviewed today. They both got Film 4 in their production companies, so they are very small budget. And as I say, I think this one was a sleeper hit. I think it has definitely got fans out there, and I do think give it a few years, this could become a cult film. And it's often films like this that you don't often hear much about, that you go and see them and they're amazing, and you wonder why they didn't get the traction that they did. I don't hear loads of people talking about this film, but when I do, it's a name, as I said, it keeps cropping up every now and then, and now I've seen it, I completely understand that. As soon as the film finished, I was like, I need to, get a hold of this movie. I need to watch it over and over again, because I know that with repeat viewings, you're definitely going to pick up on more stuff that you don't see the first time. Before we go into overall opinions, though, we can go over some of our favourite scenes. I know I've got loads, so it's going to be very difficult to narrow it down to one, but if you want to go ahead and give us your favourite scene first.
It's almost a scene. It's more of a conversation between um, Christopher Walken and the kind of the number twos of Woody Harrelson's gang,
Mm.
and it's this brilliant where he's like, "Put your hands up," and he's like, "No," and then he just goes into it, and they're like, "Why not?" And he's there like, "Because I don't want to," and it's just this brilliant passage where they're confused as to what's happening, and they're like, "Where are they?" He's like, "I don't know. I'm really trying hard not to do the voice." Um,
Yeah, don't just go for it, man. Just go for
and
it.
then it's just the whole conversation where the gangsters like don't have a clue what to do because it's almost the anti-gangster where they don't know what they should do. Then this police car pulls up, so they're there like trying to hide their shotguns and stuff. And obviously later on in the film, it then reverts to I think they share cigarettes and stuff, and it's just this kind of this brilliant character moment where it just sums up everything you need to know about this film. And that's the thing, the fact that I'm almost creating 1 minute of a passage where the whole film kind of plays out like that. It was just so hard to pick a favourite scene, but that's probably my favourite, with the second one being the Sam Rockwell monologue with the incredible fake film being put over the top.
Yeah, that's the scene I thought you was going to go for, to be honest. But both are great, and that bit with Christopher Walken, it's made by the reactions of the henchmen, where they've never come across this situation before, so they're sort of like really hesitant, don't know what to do. But that scene where Sam Rockwell sort of like just runs down the whole film, his idea for it. He says earlier that it needs more action scenes. He wants to see people shooting, and it's when you've got like the whole line of good guy, like the psychopaths, just shooting, and it's so over the top. It's so dramatic. I did love that scene, and I love how it plays out as well, because it could have very easily just been set at the campfire where he's just talking in real time, but the fact that it shows you clips of sort of like a real life film playing out, it's brilliant. If I'm gonna give my favourite scene though, God, there's so many. I really, really enjoyed the mid-credit scene because I really love the character. I keep forgetting his name. Tom Waits. I think he's a musician. Um, and in the film, as I said, like he goes through this whole backstory of how him and his wife were serial killers, and they killed other serial killers, and they travelled all across the country, killing loads and loads of people in very, very horrifically brutal ways. And I think Sam Rockwell puts an advert in the paper, doesn't he, for real life
Yeah,
psychopaths to come to Colin Farrell's home so that he can get some research and inspiration for his screenplay. And Colin Farrell's like, no, no, I don't want psychopaths in my house. But one comes in, he invites him down, sits him down, he tells him his backstory. And then he says, like, in your film, can you please put a message at the end of the film? some kind of dedication, is it, or like a message to my wife who's out there, tell her that I love her. And he goes, yeah, yeah, I swear on my life I'll put it in there. And then, because that's like about a quarter of the way into the film, you kind of forget about it because you're caught up with the rest of the film. Then the credits hit, and then it starts up again, and he gets on the payphone to Colin Farrell, and he's like, "I just saw your movie, and you didn't put a message at the end." And Colin Farrell's like, "Oh shit!" And it's kind of a weird ending though, because it's sort of like melancholy almost. Like it's almost like Colin Farrell doesn't care, and that puts the serial killer off. He's like, "Oh, well, maybe I won't kill you now then. Maybe I'll kill you some other time." And he just sort of hangs up. But I loved that scene because purely for the fact was that I completely forgot about that plot point. So when it came up again at the end, I thought, that's genius. That's brilliant.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and we'll go into overall opinions now. So if you want to go over yours, and then we'll close out for the show.
This is one of the wittiest films you'll have seen in the past 10 years. It's probably come out. I highly recommend you see this film. It's funny. You'll have a great time. I think this the casual film fan, anyone, if you, even if you don't watch film much, you'd kind of watch this and you kind of get what they're self-referencing at. And all in all, it's just a fantastic film. From the opening scene to the final scene, you're gonna have a great time.
Yeah, and I'll sort of echo that as well. This is one of the cleverest comedies I've seen in a long, long time. Really glad I've gotten around to seeing it because, as I said, it was one of the always one that I've been curious to see. I've always seen the name floated around there, but there's so much in it. The script's so perfectly written, absolutely 100% on the nail all the way through. One that I think definitely benefits from multiple viewings. I know for a fact that I'm going to watch this film again very, very soon. And what's more than a perfectly written script is when you've got fantastic actors and a supporting cast to go along with it. And this is probably one of the best comedy casts you'll see in any comedy film,
Mm.
and I kind of regret that we watched this now because I think that this may have been one of my honorable mentions on our top 10 comedy films list because I really enjoyed it that much. It's got everything. It's got great action. It's got fantastically witty dialogue. It's got a really unique style to it, and also it's got a lot of violence if that's your thing as well. So I definitely think it's one to check out if you're still sticking with us. If we haven't, hope we haven't spoiled it too much, but it's definitely one that I think that everyone should check out, and it definitely deserves your support because I think that it deserves that cult following, which I hope it gets in a few years. But yeah, that'll do it for our main show today. Be sure to rate, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think of Attack the Block and what you think of Seven Psychopaths as well. Have you seen it? Haven't you seen it? Let us know. You can find us at Facebook at facebook.com/cinemasavvy. We're on Twitter at cinema_savvy, and we're also at letterbox.com/cinema_savvy. So follow us on there, get involved with the channel, and next week we'll be bringing you our main review on Everest. I've seen the trailers for that. That looks incredible. I'll be seeing that at the end of the week, and then next week we'll also have another film club review. Depending on what you choose, George, for your pick after Everest. So until then, thank you very much for listening.